Alright, once again another updated deck profile for set number 10, along with technically a promo. This time on my Destiny 1 scale, Aelquilibra. I was originally going to do it when it came to set 10, but considering that we got a promo that came out alongside it, I decided to wait it out with the promo, and because that one new promo definitely just made the deck even more offensive, as this deck is already an offensive style deck. It's also very simple, and unfortunately because of that promo, this one budget tech is no longer as budget as it used to be. Although, most of the key pieces are still very cheap to build, so if you do want to build this deck, I can say I can recommend it, as this can still kill some games, just because of how offensive this deck is. And it's a very simple playstyle. You basically power up your rearguards, and then your rearguards get some extra skills when you power them up. That's basically the idea of this playstyle, and I really love this deck because of its dragon with guns, and I'm a sucker for dragons, and adding guns on top of it is just awesome, especially with the Kagero-like aesthetic with a bit of Tachikaze. But overall, I did have this deck ever since release, mainly just because I pulled a bunch of SR cards for this deck, so I decided to just end up building the deck anyway, and also because I pulled a bunch of the Aelquilibra cards itself, that I just kind of just figured just why not. And I had fun with the deck ever since, but over time, the support was just here and there. It was just iffy, and it didn't exactly really change the deck much, so there was no point of reviewing it until we got the new promo and also a recent card from set 10, which will be explained why later. But with all that out of the way, let's just begin with the deck profile with, of course, the Ride deck. Starting off with the starter, Varpera Dragon. You could actually run whatever starter you want, but this fits the theme. In which we go to Rank 10 Warcraft Dragon. So when your grade 2 rides on top of it, the Gatling Dragon, you can call this to rearguard from the soul and then soul charge 1, so it just kind of refunds itself. And also some early game attacker, which is also very nice. And then the main mechanic of the deck. So it's called Overcharge, which basically when it's chosen by the ability of your at least grade 3 Aelquilibra, it gets a skill. In this case, it's just plus 10k for the turn. And let's just say a lot of them are going to have that part, and that is going to be a weakness of the deck, as you need to choose it through Aelquilibra's skill, and Aelquilibra is one Vanguard that cannot choose a whole board. So you have to be very picky on what skills you want to activate, basically. In which we go to Gatling Dragon. So when your Aelquilibra rides on top of it, you can look at top 3 cards of your deck to choose one card from among them and add it to your hand. But if it's an Overcharge card, you also can Soul Charge 1, and of course put the rest of the bottom of the deck. Searching is always very nice, and I like it that it's also free and also can give you additional Soul Charge, because this deck does use a bit of Soul, but you have a lot of cards that fixes up Soul, so it's not like that's a big issue, because it's mainly the Destiny 1 scales Aelquilibra that uses the soul, because the main skill is once per turn at act, you can Soul Blast 2, choose 3 of your rearguards, and they get plus 5k power in the end turn. And if you happen to choose at least 2 cards with Overcharge ability, you draw a card and plus 10k power as well. So basically, you charge up your rearguards for power, and then if you chose enough of the archetype stuff, aka the Overcharge stuff, it gets another 10k and additional draw. Yes, it's Soul Blast 2, but you have a lot of cards that go to Soul, so Soul is not actually that much of an issue for this deck. But that draw is very necessary, as you can actually be short in key pieces, so getting that extra plus is very nice. And this is what I mean, that you have to be very picky with your skills, as Overcharge as a skill mechanic requires you to be chosen by Aelquilibra, and considering that this can only pick 3 from this skill, which is the main skill, it could cause a bit of an issue where you have to be very picky on your skills, especially with certain cards that you might be forced to pick, even though you prefer a certain other card. So just keep that one in mind, but basically you give 3 rearguards extra power and itself extra power. But anyway, to the next skill, which is the Divine skill. If your opponent's Vanguard is at least grade 3, you can counter blast 1, choose 2 of your rearguards and they get plus 5k power in the end of turn. And then if your opponent has at least 4 or less damage, you make your opponent's Vanguard take 1 damage. And also, any trigger effect gets minus 10,000. So it doesn't nullify the trigger power overall, it just basically minuses the 10k. So if there's any additional trigger abilities that go 15k instead, that means that basically it's minus 10k from that 15k trigger power, because there are some special abilities that give 15k trigger power, or the over trigger, so basically 100 million minus the 10k. Divine skill is just here as an extra bonus, especially giving you a full field overcharge for 1 turn and brutally hurt your opponent with 1 damage, which could actually finish games, because this is a high power attack deck. So it's just overall already very simple with the power, but everything overall revolves around its support, as those rearguards are the ones that will be giving the extra pressure. In which now we go to the main deck, with 3 more for persona riding, of course. And of course you want that extra power, so obviously it's most important for you to persona ride, unless if they make an evolution in this in the future, which I do hope they do. And then to the order card, to equalize the scales of the world. This is probably one of those order cards where you have to kind of keep it as a 4 of, just because you play it by counterblasting 1 while your Vanguard's Aelquilibra, and you choose 2 units that are grade 3 or less with different cardings that have Overcharge from your drop zone and call it to rearguard. It's a -1 for +2 for a deck that doesn't really use counterblast, and you do have countercharge for the deck anyway, and it's there to use your Overcharge cards for discard fodder so you can superior call them back. It's just very helpful to refill your board as it's also a rearguard reliant deck. So you just have to run 4 of these just so you can fill up your board. And then to a card that some people are always iffy to run or not, but I kind of like to run it, is Panzer Shrek Dragon. Because this is more if you went first, because there's another card that uses Energy Blast 3. But if you go first, this is technically one of the better cards to use, especially since you got your new promo that kind of asks you to kind of prefer running an alternate option besides the other Energy Blast card. So at Overcharge, when this card attacks, you can Energy Blast 3 to give it plus 15k power at the end of the battle, and then at the end of the battle, retire this unit to draw a card. Yep, basically a high power attack that also gives you a draw and also retires itself, so you could always superior call it through your order card back. And in your first grade 3 turn, considering that this is going to be at least 33k with the Overcharge, that is very huge in your first grade 3 turn, especially if you went first on your opponent still being grade 2. That's why I kind of like this card, especially because this is not restricted on your opponent being grade 3, so that's why I'm running this. In which now we go to the grade 2 lineup, which is the other Energy Blast user, which is the Shahab. So Shahab gets plus 5k power if you have at least 3 units with the Overcharge ability. That includes itself. So already will be 15k, and if you overcharge it, plus 20k, and this is going to be one of your main Overcharge target due to its second skill, because at Overcharge, when your Vanguard attacks, you can Energy Blast 3 to stand this card and then plus 10k power in the end turn. Yep, so this is just a self-restanding rearguard for Energy Blasting 3. This is the other card that will be using energy, but this is the more common one that will be using energy. But if the games go too long, you will run out of energy, unfortunately, especially if you're doing the double Shihab. But main restanding rearguard, you just have to run it, and of course is your main Overcharge target as well. And then we go to Drag Ritter Badia. So at Overcharge, it gets plus 10k, and the main skill is that when placed on rearguard from hand, you can look at top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 Overcharge ability card or 1 Equalize the Scales of the World, your order card, and put it in your hand. But if you do this, choose a card from hand to put to soul. Main searcher, which is why you run this, and also kind of refund soul. Of course, it's a trade 1 for 1, but at least it doesn't cost counterblast, so you just kind of have to run this just for the search because it's consistency. And then to the new card for set 10 is Lisco Skiff Dragon. So at Overcharge plus 10k, and at the end of battle this card attacked, you can retire this unit to choose one of your Vanguards to give it this ability. And here's the important one. You give your Vanguard this ability where when it attacks, choose one of your rearguards, it gets those 5k power in turn. Basically, because your Vanguard gets the ability, that means that you could choose another rearguard to overcharge. This is very huge that it basically gives you a 4th rearguard to overcharge, which is why you really want to run 4 of this, even though it retires itself from rearguard, because it does make a little bit of an awkward interaction with another card. But if you do time yourself correctly, it basically can give you just more abilities to activate, which is why you just have to run this one as a 4 of. And it's one of your better options as well than a certain one other card that was also a grade 2 that gets plus 5k power, 5k shield for Aelquilibra, and also just prevents intercept, which just depends on you if you prefer to run that or not, but getting that extra overcharge is just very helpful. That's why you want to run 4 of this. And also, the giving the overcharge ability to your Vanguard does not need to be overcharge itself. You do not need to overcharge this to give your Vanguard the overcharge. So that's also a nice part. And now to the other new card, but it's not from set 10, but a promo. Feel Free Dragon. So this one, I'm just going to say it right now, it's basically Varpera. But as Overcharge, and if you do not stand a rearguard during the turn, you can put this card to soul to choose one of your front row Overcharge units, and stand it, and then draw a card. Literally just Varpera, basically, but for Overcharge units. And it's basically your backup restander, as sometimes you won't be able to do double Shahab, and now you don't really need to do double Shahab, which is also very nice. Hence why I decided to run a little more beaters, because you could just use this as the first restander, and then just use Shahab as the second restander. So no reason not to run 4 of this, because it literally gives you more consistency for 5 attacks. And then to some old cards, the Drag Ritter Endel, so as Overcharge plus 10k, and then also has the skill when placed on rearguard. While you have at least 2 Overcharge units, you can counterblast 1 to draw a card and Soul Charge 1. On your grade 2 turn, you're already got superior call to grade 1, so you just call this and you could literally just do some early game attacker and draw power with some extra soul charging. So this card is like pretty nice to have, although I haven't been really seeing myself using this card as much, which is why I cut it down to 3. Originally this was at a 4 of, just because you just have space for it, but 3 is still a good number. And then finally to Farisa, just for countercharging, because at Overcharge you can give it plus 10k, and then at the end of battle you can retire this unit if you did not countercharge for the turn, and then countercharge 1 because countercharge if you need it. And also the deck doesn't exactly use too much counterblast other than through mainly your order card. Just having that option is still very nice just in case you need it. And finally 4 PGs because PGs. And into trigger lineup, OT, 8 crits for full on pressure, 3 draws because you really want to see your key pieces, and this deck doesn't exactly draw a lot. And finally 4 heals, 2 being counters. And so that's it for this deck profile on my Aelquilibra deck, updated with set 10 along with a promo. What do you guys think of it? What other cards would you recommend, and what other changes would you make? Personally, there are a few other recommendations that you can run, like the Intercept Preventer, just because it might be better than certain other cards, but the deck just mainly has a bunch of iffy support with few cards that you just have to run. And another card I can say is the Drop Zone Recycler, that is the grade 3 that can also put itself to soul, but considering that our new promo literally puts itself to soul as well, and also gives you a draw without counterblasting. Of course, this is a little better, but that one does let you recycle your order card as well. But it is personal preferences on how you want to build it. Personally, I kind of like the deck as it is right now. I might still run the Intercept Preventer, but overall, the deck is just very simple and fun. Just basically power up your rearguards, and then your powered up rearguards can activate their skills. It's simple and effective. And I could still say that technically it is a budget deck, other than through one promo card, which is this one, because that's the most expensive card just because it's a promo, but it might get cheaper over time because the deck is still very underrated. And overall, it's just very simple and fun. So if you want to build a deck as a new player, this is one of those decks I can definitely recommend, just because you could literally get all the pieces for cheap. And in some cases, you could even win so many games just because of overcharging your power. But on that, I really love these dragons with guns, and see you all next time.